Okay, well, everyone can breathe a collective sigh of relief. Come on, all together now. The holiday rush is over, and it's time to settle into that wonderful month of January. I was pondering the significance of January when I was writing the article for this month's newsletter, and I concluded that January both offers little and it demands very little of us too. I think that's a win-win situation. There's no more holidays to plan for. There's not much in the way of yard work. If you like football, January is a great month. You've got the NFL playoffs. You've got the college football championship. If you bleed 49er red, well, then it's not so great this year, but that's another story. It is tempting in January to really settle in for that long winter's nap that was supposed to happen on Christmas Eve. And I say give in to that temptation. Give in to that temptation. Life should have an ebb and a flow quality to it. We can't always expect to keep going at the same pace all the time. So January gives us really a wonderful opportunity for some quiet reflection. And we actually started that process here on New Year's Eve with our Burning Bowl service. Last Sunday I was using the story of Ebenezer Scrooge in A Christmas Carol as an example of how we are always offered an opportunity to change the way we look at the world. We get to sift through our negative, pessimistic, cynical aspects of our worldview, assuming we have any of those, of course. And we can choose to release them, and we can replace them with positive and life-affirming ideas and values and attitudes. And that was the practice that we engaged in on New Year's Eve, which is a good start, but it requires more than that if we're going to realize any kind of lasting good in our lives. So I like to think of January as the collective pause, a slight slowing down, the opportunity to turn within and do some of that kind of work. Karen and I have been living here in California now for just over 10 years, and I've really come to consider January to be really the only month that I would call winter at this point. Think about it. December is kind of dark and cold, but December is really filled with enough distractions and things like that you really don't have to deal with the darkness and the cold in quite the same way. By the time we get to January, well, the days are starting to get a little bit longer. It's hard to see, but it is happening. It starts out at about maybe 30 seconds a day, and then by mid-February it becomes noticeable. You can see it. You can feel it. And I know that we have, I'm looking around here, I can see a lot of gardeners here in the congregation. I know we have a lot of avid gardeners here. And from what I understand, one of the great things about being a gardener here in California is that you can actually start planting a bunch of different veggies from seed in February. At least according to this chart that I saw from UC Davis, and I think they probably know a thing or two. They say that from beets to turnips, you can start planting from seed. So January is a time to begin to dream and plan. If February is gardening time, then January is time to dream and plan. Whether it's a garden in the dirt out back or if it's the garden of our own consciousness, we get to plan what we want to grow over the next 12 months. January, it's the perfect month to cultivate a renewed focus on the all-important question of what is it that provides us with a sense of meaning, with a sense of purpose in life. Call it a philosophy of life, our core values, a worldview. The label isn't as important as being clear, as being coherent. And doing that requires a time of reflection and reason. And the really good news here is that this isn't some kind of a monumental task. We don't have to sell the house, move to Tibet, or hitchhike across India. I mean, if you want to do those things, That's great, but what it requires simply is attention and intention. Or if we want to use that gardening metaphor again, we can grow wherever we are planted. We can grow and we can thrive right where we are, provided, just like in gardening, we're willing to do a little digging, a little fertilizing, and maybe pull a few weeds from time to time. And we do that by asking questions, things like, where am I going to choose to focus my attention going through life? Starting right now and continuing through the new year. How do I maintain a sense of optimism and promote love instead of feeding fear and pessimism? Now you may have noticed that nearly every week we start the service here by saying that we are celebrating the true, the good, and the beautiful. That's not just a catchphrase. That's not just some kind of a clever catchphrase. It has some deep and ancient significance. Karen and I were ordained at Unity Village back in 2004, and during the ceremony, when they call your name to go up on stage, they also put your picture up on the screen, along with a quote that you would choose. And if any of you have ever been to the Village Chapel back at Unity Village in Kansas City, it's huge. So this screen is like the screen in a movie theater, which means that whatever quote you put up there is really going to stand out. And it becomes kind of like your intention or theme for your ministry. I took my quote from Paul's letter to the Philippians, chapter 4, verse 8. I had to cut it back a little bit to fit the space I had for the quote, but here's the whole thing. Finally, beloved, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is pleasing, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence and if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. Paul was a very well-educated man, and being a well-educated person back in those days means that you knew something about Greek philosophy. Paul was clearly influenced by Greek philosophy. The true, the good, the beautiful, those are considered to be the primary matters of ultimate human concern to the great Greek philosophers like Plato and Aristotle and others, and they've been showing up over and over again all around the world. You can find the true, the good, the beautiful in Buddhist, Hindu, Jewish scriptures, and also the works of Freud and Gandhi and Einstein for that matter. They have a universal quality, and the really amazing thing is that just these three things can give rise to just about every other expression of value. Now that may sound a little bit like exaggeration, but think for a moment about the color printer that most of us have at home. Take a look at the print cartridge sometime. You might notice that it contains just 3 colors of ink. Shades of blue, red, yellow combined to give us just about every imaginable color. Look at that. 3 colors combined to give us every shade in the spectrum. 3 colors can recreate the entire spectrum, just like goodness, truth, and beauty can give rise to the entire spectrum of human values. That's how it works. Now that doesn't mean that we're always going to agree on exactly what those things are. Say beautiful, for instance. Take music. I might have a hard time appreciating China's version of classical music because the rhythms, the musical scales are totally different from our experience. And you know what I mean. If you've ever listened to classical Chinese music or Chinese opera as they call it, it can be kind of clashing and discordant at first, but to the Chinese, it's sublime. It is a true representation of beauty. Well, I happen to think that Jimi Hendrix and Pink Floyd are sublime. You may not, but it's still the same thing. We're engaged in a search for beauty, an expression of something that gives us a glimpse of the transcendent. And as our consciousness grows, our concept of beauty can expand. That Chinese music may sound strange at first, but if I'm willing to embrace it, go into it deeply, learn to understand why it is the way that it is, there's beauty there too. Goodness. When it comes to goodness, hey, if I live in a tribal culture, my idea of what is good is going to be all tied up in what is good for my tribe, my group. What benefits and advances the survival of my group? Hey, those other tribes, they're on their own. That is, until the day when I really sit down and talk to those other folks, start to realize that, hey, we're a lot alike. Maybe we can trade things with each other, trade things that we need, cooperate. My consciousness expands. My idea of goodness expands as well. Truth. Everyone wants to know what is most real. What is it that explains reality and the things that we encounter in the world? What explains existence? You know, at one time, most human beings believed that thunder and lightning were the gods roughhousing up in the clouds or throwing things at human beings to try to punish us. They believed that seizures were the work of demons. Then along comes science, spoils all the fun, gives us natural explanations for all the things that we used to think were supernatural and magic. And the beat goes on. Our definition of truth expands and changes and grows. So all of us in some way are practicing these primary values to the best of our ability, depending on the scope of our awareness. We search for truth to explain reality. We search for beauty because it creates a sense of joy and peace. We look for goodness so that we can thrive together instead of constantly fighting and competing. If we choose to just focus on the three primary values, the true, the good, the beautiful, we can create a coherent framework for living. And I want to offer some practical suggestions for how we might work with those three values. These ideas, by the way, of the three values and the primary colors comes from the work of a guy named Steve McIntosh, who wrote this book here called Integral Consciousness and the Future of Evolution, how the integral worldview is transforming politics, culture, and spirituality. And he says that each of the primary values have a yin and a yang quality to them, an inflow and an outflow, giving and receiving. If we want the true, the good, and the beautiful to be more than just abstractions, if we want them to energize us, we have to look at them in terms of inflow and outflow. And there's this terrific graphic here that illustrates exactly what I mean. Beauty, goodness, and truth. Yin and yang, diversity within oneness. So here's how it works. Beauty, the primary value of beauty, contains two things: the inflow and the outflow, appreciation and expression. It flows into us through appreciation, whether it's music appreciation, literature, a painting, a sunset. We take it in, we let it do its work within us, it moves us, it inspires us. We go to concerts, we go to art galleries, garden walks, book clubs. The possibilities are endless. We take it in and then we find ways to express it. It needs both qualities. We express it. So, plant a garden. Write poetry, even if you don't think that you're a poet. Sit down and write whatever moves you. Create something, whether it's a painting or a souffle, for that matter. That works. Every one of us has the creative capacity, and if we haven't found it yet, or if for some reason we've stopped doing it, we need to get working on it again so that we can have both the inflow and the outflow. When it comes to goodness, the inflow is in the stillness, or what we in Unity call the silence. We have to take some time to be quiet. We have to let the mental chatter fade so that we can stop imposing our opinions, our judgments, and things like that on all the people and the events that are around us in the world. And the silence is where we begin to catch a glimpse of that very important fact that we're all in the same boat, that we're interdependent, that we're interrelated. That's the inflow. The most common outflow of goodness is in the form of service, generosity. I may not be able to save the world, but I can always do something to make life a little bit better for the people that are right here in my little corner of the world. And that's how it works. If everybody pays attention to that, it all gets better. It all gets better. Truth. We find truth through learning. That's the inflow. Learning. Not just school books, not just textbooks. Life itself can be a great teacher, if you know what I mean. Life can be a great teacher if we're willing to be a student of life. In Unity, we value lifelong learning, which means that we have to be willing to embrace uncertainty and love the questions instead of settling for easy answers, which are all too common out there. Everybody has an easy answer. Sometimes it's more important to live in the question and embrace the uncertainty. And if learning is the inflow, then teaching is the outflow. We look for ways to share our gifts, and the best way is to really live what we learn. We're not all going to get opportunities to teach in the way that that word is ordinarily defined, although I think there are more opportunities to do that than we may realize, to be able to get up and share our life lessons and our experience. Helping out in youth ed is one way, to go in there and tell a story or to work with our young people. Things like that are so important. But we can always look for ways to express what we've learned by how we speak and act in our everyday lives. That's the most important kind of teaching that we do. Our life is an expression of what we've learned. So appreciation and expression, stillness and service, learning and teaching. The guidelines are in the handout in your bulletin. You can take it home and work with it. And I'm inviting you to take this time in January to begin this process of working with these three simple primary values that we celebrate here every single Sunday, and see how to make them more vibrant in your daily lives in 2015. Yin and Yang is about balance. And if we take the true, the good, and the beautiful and look at them in terms of balancing the inflow and the outflow, you might be surprised how far that's going to get you. See you next week.